On the evening of a Valentine's Day dance in February 1974, 17-year-old Carla Walker and her boyfriend, Rodney McCoy, set out for what was meant to be a joyful high school memory. The two, known as a couple at their Fort Worth, Texas school, were deeply in love. Rodney picked Carla up in his mother's borrowed Ford LTD, and together they headed to the event. According to McCoy, the night was filled with dancing, laughter, and time spent with friends. It felt like nothing else in the world mattered. After the dance, the couple met up with another pair of classmates. All four teens cruised down a popular boulevard, a routine Friday night ritual among Fort Worth's high school students. The mood remained upbeat and carefree as they shared conversation and music. Around 12:30 a.m., McCoy dropped the other couple off at their car. He and Carla continued driving, eventually stopping near a bowling alley when Carla needed to use the restroom. Once she returned to the car, the two began to make out. Carla reclined in her seat, using her purse as a pillow. In an instant, their night turned to terror. A stranger yanked open the passenger door and struck McCoy with the butt of a pistol. The attacker shoved a gun into the car, pulled the trigger 3 times, but the weapon failed to discharge. Despite being beaten, McCoy saw Carla beg the man to stop. She agreed to go with him, saying, "Stop hitting him. I'll go with you." Her final words to McCoy were, "Rodney, go get my dad." Then she was gone. When McCoy regained consciousness, bleeding from the head, he drove to the Walker home and pounded on the door. "They've got her," he cried. Police were called, and Carla's father rushed to the bowling alley, but it was too late. Shortly after 1 a.m., Rodney McCoy arrived at the Walker family's home in a state of shock. Blood streamed down his face and stained his shirt. He pounded on the door, yelling frantically. Carla's older sister, Cindy Stone, opened it to find McCoy screaming, "They've got her." His head injury was visible and his panic unmistakable. The Walkers, still groggy from sleep, were thrust into a nightmare with no warning. McCoy explained that someone had attacked them in the bowling alley parking lot and abducted Carla. Her father, unwilling to sit idly by, grabbed his gun and rushed to the scene. But when he arrived, the lot was empty. There was no sign of Carla or her attacker. Police were notified immediately, but the initial hours yielded no answers. The following days were filled with unbearable waiting. McCoy stayed at the Walker home, surrounded by Carla's devastated family. His grief was evident, silent, shaken, and visibly broken. The Walkers clung to any hope, but no leads emerged. Then, for days after Carla vanished, the call came. A Fort Worth patrol officer discovered her body beneath a rural culvert, approximately 9 miles from the abduction site. Carla was lying on her back. Her clothing was torn, and she had clear bruises on her neck. Investigators determined she had been sexually assaulted and strangled. Deep gashes marked her thighs and legs. At the scene, Fort Worth police meticulously collected all available evidence. They documented the area and preserved Carla's clothing, despite limitations in forensic technology at the time. Although DNA testing was not yet in use, their commitment to preserving physical evidence would prove invaluable decades later. For now, though, Carla's family faced the unimaginable. Their daughter was gone and her killer remained unknown. In the days following the discovery of Carla Walker's body, investigators began assembling what little evidence they had. With no eyewitnesses besides Rodney McCoy, detectives relied heavily on his account of the attack. The location where Carla's body was found, a secluded culvert not visible from the road, suggested that the perpetrator knew the area well. It indicated premeditation, possibly from someone local. To assist the investigation, McCoy agreed to undergo hypnosis in hopes of recovering additional details about the assailant. Under hypnosis, he described a man as having a skinny nose, short hair, wearing a green sleeveless jacket and a cowboy hat. Using these details, police created a composite sketch to distribute in the area. At the bowling alley parking lot, officers recovered Carla's purse and a magazine clip from a Ruger pistol. The magazine corroborated McCoy's story about the attacker's weapon. Still, despite the physical injuries he had sustained, police could not rule McCoy out as a suspect. Given the lack of other leads, investigators scrutinized the story. To validate his version of events, detectives interviewed the other teenage couple who had spent part of the evening with McCoy and Carla. Their accounts confirmed that the night had been cheerful and uneventful. No signs of tension or conflict were reported. Carla's family also maintained their full support of McCoy, describing his bond with Carla and their confidence in his innocence. McCoy voluntarily took 2 polygraph tests. He passed both. With few leads, police turned their attention to local Ruger pistol owners. One of them was Glenn Samuel McCurley, who claimed his weapon had been stolen. He, too, passed a polygraph and was eliminated from suspicion. Despite extensive interviews and efforts to pursue all avenues, the investigation stalled. Without further evidence or a clear suspect, the case went cold. For more than 40 years, the murder of Carla Walker remained unsolved. As time passed, leads grew cold, and the case faded from public attention. Rodney McCoy, burdened by grief and memories, left Fort Worth behind. He moved to Alaska, built a new life, married, and raised a family. Eventually, he returned to Texas, but the loss of Carla continued to weigh heavily on him. In 2018, hope was reignited when Carla's brother, Jim Walker, reached out to the Fort Worth Police Department. He asked investigators to re-examine the case with modern forensic tools that had not existed in 1974. Encouraged by advancements in DNA technology, a new team of detectives agreed to take another look. They reviewed the preserved evidence, including Carla's dress, which still held a semen stain. Although a partial DNA profile had previously been extracted from it, the sample had been too small to draw conclusive results. Despite this, the renewed interest in the case prompted detectives to investigate further. They compiled a list of more than 80 potential suspects. Among them, once again, was Rodney McCoy. Investigators then focused on clothing that had been carefully stored for decades. Using Carla's bra strap, they submitted material to Othram Labs, a company specializing in advanced DNA analysis. This time they succeeded. Othram was able to extract a full DNA profile from the evidence. Through genetic genealogy, analysts were able to trace the suspect's family surname. The findings pointed directly back to someone already known to the case, Glenn Samuel McCurley. He had been interviewed in 1974 and dismissed after passing a polygraph. Now, decades later, science revealed what traditional methods could not. McCurley had never been far from the truth. In 2020, a stunning breakthrough finally brought answers to a case that had haunted Fort Worth for decades. Glenn Samuel McCurley, then in his 70s, was identified as the source of the DNA recovered from Carla Walker's clothing. Astonishingly, he had been living quietly just 2 miles from the Walker family's home all along. In September 2020, police moved in and arrested McCurley. During initial questioning, he remained guarded, denying involvement even when confronted with the damning DNA evidence. But as detectives pressed harder, the walls began to crack. Eventually, McCurley lowered his head and muttered the words that changed everything. "I did do it, I guess." What followed was a chilling confession. He admitted that on the night of Carla's abduction, he had been drunk and roaming the streets in search of a victim. Carla became his tragic target. McCurley was charged with capital murder. As his trial began in 2021, the courtroom was tense with anticipation. But in an unexpected twist, McCurley changed his plea mid-trial, from not guilty to guilty. The courtroom fell silent as he accepted responsibility for the brutal crime that had shattered so many lives. He was sentenced to life in prison, bringing long overdue justice to Carla's family and finally clearing Rodney McCoy's name. Forensic science had done what decades of traditional investigation could not. Years of carefully preserved evidence, coupled with modern DNA analysis, had cracked the case wide open. Though McCurley never confessed to any other crimes, authorities had considered him a possible suspect in at least 3 additional murders. He died in prison in July 2021, taking whatever other secrets he held to his grave. But for the Walkers, one truth had finally come to light, and that was enough. Long after the headlines faded and the courtroom doors closed, the people closest to Carla Walker were left to carry the weight of her loss. Rodney McCoy, Carla's high school sweetheart, has lived his entire life in the shadow of that night in 1974. He still remembers her voice pleading with the attacker to spare him. "Carla saved my life," he says quietly. "I wish it would have been the other way around." That final act of bravery, of selflessness, has haunted him for decades. Though he went on to marry, raise children, and build a life, the trauma of that night never truly released its grip. Each milestone in life carried a shadow, a reminder of the future that Carla never got to see. For Carla's brother Jim Walker, the pain was equally enduring. Yet unlike many who succumbed to the passage of time, Jim never stopped fighting. He became the driving force behind reopening the case, reaching out to law enforcement, investigators, and anyone who would listen. When the truth finally emerged, it brought with it a complicated mixture of devastation and relief. McCurley's confession did not undo the loss, but gave the family something they had not had for 46 years: clarity. It allowed them to grieve without question, to speak Carla's name without uncertainty, and to honor her memory with the full truth finally in the light. This case is not just about a horrific crime. It is about the people left behind. Their strength, their love, and their unwavering pursuit of justice turned a cold case into a symbol of hope. Carla's story stands as a testament to the endurance of memory, the power of science, and the human spirit's refusal to forget. If Carla Walker's story moved you, do not let it fade into silence. Like this video to honor her memory. Subscribe to our channel for more true crime cases that deserve to be told. And most importantly, share this story. Because justice delayed is not always justice denied, and every voice raised can help bring light to the darkest corners of unsolved crimes. Someone out there still needs answers. Be part of keeping their story alive.